And now, can you please join me in welcoming our fifth speaker of the evening, Sophia Dhrolia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. So my son was created in a clinic and birthed by my wife. And my daughter was created in a petri dish and birthed by me. And I'm a proud queer parent. Something that I never imagined possible. Actually, neither did my family. I grew up with immigrant East Indian parents, and as a first-generation Canadian, my mom had big dreams for me. I would be a doctor. I would be a wife to a handsome Ismaili Muslim man. I would be a mother to beautiful children. And I would be deeply religious. I managed to fulfill one of those dreams, and I have beautiful children. But I have to say, I think I lucked out because I married a gorgeous woman, and I'm proud to work as an EDI specialist, work that I find to be impactful and meaningful every day. But I'm here today to share my journey to becoming a parent, which has come with its own unique challenges, triumphs, and learnings. My hope in sharing my story today is to help shape a better future for healthcare, for people wanting to experience pregnancy, and a better future in general for kids growing up in different families. When my wife and I met, oh yeah, these are my kids, yeah, and my immigrant East Indian parents. They don't know they're here, so. So when my wife and I met, we didn't waste any time. We moved in together after 1 month. I proposed after 3, and we got married on our 1-year anniversary. It's called U-hauling. Hey, and it's worked for us. We just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary last week. And she's here today, so. Now, when we met, we both shared the desire to have kids. And we had decided that she would carry our first child, primarily due to age. I'm younger. Sorry, babe. And the fact that I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to be pregnant. So we opted for intrauterine insemination, which is IUIs for short, which involve inseminating in a very clinical, sterile environment. Think stirrups and someone with a headlamp staring at your vagina. Definitely not the baby making we're used to in rom-coms. After 6 IUIs, my wife was pregnant. And at this point, language became extremely important to me, especially as a non-biological parent. Coworkers, friends, family, and even strangers would ask us invasive questions that always seemed to start with, I don't mean to be rude, but can I ask? And then launch into, how did you pick the dad? Oh, I mean, how did you pick the donor? Was it hard? But how did you make the baby? Until one day, I snapped. I said, buddy, just Google it before coming to me. You can even go into incognito mode if it makes you feel more comfortable and type, how do lesbians make babies? But stop putting the emotional labor on me. I was also feeling excluded from the positive changes that were happening to my wife's body. They made it real for her. Without a genetic link, I wasn't sure if I could connect with this child. But then Rachael was born, and then there were no questions anymore. And he looked like me, which is pretty remarkable. I also realized while watching my wife's pregnancy, I so badly wanted to experience it. So we decided that I would carry our second child. But that journey would not be an easy one. It took a very long, difficult 4 years of struggling with infertility, but I was able to become pregnant through reciprocal IVF. Now, reciprocal IVF is a fancy way of saying we used my wife's eggs because mine hated sperm. They probably still do. Our donor sperm fertilized in a petri dish We had one embryo that we froze for 8 months, transplanted into me with the hopes that it would survive to term. But I want to pause here and go back to my journey with infertility for a moment. While the statistics show that 1 in 6 couples in Canada currently experience infertility, that stat would actually be higher if queer couples were counted, but we typically aren't. In fact, if you look at the definition on the Government of Canada's website, it says, although there is no single definition of the term infertility, it typically refers to a lack of conception after a reasonable period of sexual intercourse without contraception. 1 year for women under 35 and 6 months for women over 35. Queer couples, we're not even a part of this definition. Why does this matter? Beyond the fact that Canada's official healthcare stats are off, it matters because overlooking queer folks isn't just a data problem. It's a training problem. It's a quality of care problem. And when I started to try and become pregnant, it was a problem that I began to deal with right off the bat. At my first clinic, the nurse recommended to me that my partner come in the following morning to deposit his sperm. No. After that, I had switched to a different clinic in hopes that the practitioners would be better equipped to support me as a patient. I was wrong again. At my first ultrasound, the technician said to me, "Don't worry, you'll get pregnant on that upcoming vacation." Unless my wife had some magical tricks up her sleeve. No. Then there were the infertility support groups where I would show up as the only queer individual in the room and have to listen to content that was almost exclusively centered around the experiences of heterosexual couples. The list goes on. My experience and my needs were consistently overlooked. There was no support for a non-binary person struggling to get pregnant. Couldn't explain to wife because she did experience pregnancy. Finally, though, it worked. After extremely challenging 4 years, I was pregnant, and I was so excited that this baby would be growing inside me. But then, as the baby started to grow and change, so too did my own body. And for me, this now presented a new set of challenges. You see, I'd been so focused on getting pregnant that I actually didn't think about how I would feel if and when I got pregnant. And as a non-binary individual, I struggled deeply with my gender identity as my body began to grow and change. Now, first was the touching. People just wanted to touch my body, especially my stomach. And worst of all, they felt like they could. I no longer felt like me, and I was reduced to a vessel for this child that people just felt entitled to touch. So I had to make it very clear to friends and family that I did not want to be touched. Second was the clothing. Now, growing up, I was always able to express my gender identity through clothing. My mom, bless her, she always let me wear what made me feel good, including my brother's white tuxedo when I was 6 years old. She still thinks that's what made me gay. But I've stopped correcting her. Choosing the right clothes for me always made me feel authentic and unapologetically like me. But now that I was pregnant, I found myself reduced to the 3 Fs: flowery, frilly, or frumpy. All of a sudden, clothes that once felt liberating now felt suffocating. Everything became hyper-feminine around me, but not inside me. I remember crying in the shower, feeling so conflicted with my gender identity. Thankfully, my wife helped me figure it out. We found maternity jeans, t-shirts, I squeezed into my blazers, and I made it work. And I rocked pregnancy. From there, it came time to give birth. In this, I can say, this is where the medical system happily supported me. Actually, though, it was my midwife. And side note, midwives really need to be paid more. My midwife, yes, thank you. My midwife was sensitive to and aligned to my needs. One of them being that I was not going to be breast or chest feeding, and I did not want to be asked about this after birth. So on the day, she made everyone aware, and she was attentive and proactive to my needs. Our daughter, now Gabrielle, is almost 3 years old, and she looks exactly like my wife, but has my dramatic personality. It's a win-win if you ask me. Now, my experience trying to become pregnant, my experience being pregnant, and now my experience being a parent to 2 kids has not been an easy one. While there's so much that I am grateful for, including having the resources to pursue the kinds of treatment that resulted in us having our 2 kids, this experience nonetheless revealed so much that is desperately lacking. From the lack of adequate training for medical practitioners to a lack of options in maternity clothing that made our experience so much harder than it needed to be. In response to these gaps, I've come to deeply value the importance of self-advocacy in the healthcare system, or these failings will not be fixed. And this has to be at the systemic level. Right now, our healthcare system isn't even designed to acknowledge us. Like I mentioned before, there's a lack of data collection on queer individuals, but not just in infertility, in other areas as well. There is one study though. In the 2020 Trans Pulse study, it shows that 45% of trans and non-binary individuals have unmet healthcare needs, when compared to 4% of the population in that year of the study. Both the lack of data and the inadequate care for individuals have huge implications on the healthcare system. And for things like this to change, we need to address them head on. Count queer couples in your infertility statistics. Count the LGBTQ2S+ community in your healthcare statistics. Provide adequate training for medical practitioners so that they stop assuming that because I'm in a fertility clinic and I have a uterus, I have a partner who is a cisgender man. Recognize that all people with uteruses do not share the same experiences. So look at your patient's file before speaking to them, and consider diverse support groups for people undergoing these medical processes. Medical procedures are some of the most vulnerable experiences that people can go through, so this support is critical. But advocacy isn't only required in the healthcare system. At this stage in my journey, I now need to turn this energy into advocating for the future of my kids. Now, don't get me wrong. A part of me is so proud when my 2.5-year-old yells, "I don't have a daddy, I have 2 mommies." But imagine having to repeat that over and over in your lifetime. Being a kid is hard enough, but educating other kids and adults shouldn't have to be a part of that. This is where educators and other caregivers need to ensure that they're using supportive and inclusive language, like parents and caregivers, instead of just mommy and daddy. I want the education system to instill confidence in my kids, not shame or exclusion for being a part of a different but amazing family. I want the education system to support all family structures and ensure that kids learn about gender identity and gender expression at a young age, so that when my kids say one of their parents is non-binary, their friends just get it, and they don't have to launch into a Wikipedia description. Now, those are my asks and calls to action for those that are in the healthcare system and in the education system. But what can you do if you don't directly operate in these systems? Well, I'd like to leave you with 3 key takeaways. 1, be mindful. Be mindful of expecting parents, pregnant parents, and parents in general. If you have curiosities because you believe their experience is different than you're familiar with, do the research. Do not ask someone else to do the emotional labor for you. Don't touch someone who is pregnant without their consent, even if that's what you may have wanted or you're familiar with others in your life. 2, advocate for your needs. Advocate for your needs in the healthcare system and in the education system, because you will be opening the doors for so many like you that have to go through the same systems. Now, I might be slightly biased as a director of equity, diversity, and inclusion, but I truly believe, and I've seen over and over again, that this is it's a key factor to real change. And last but not least, if someone has seed money and wants to invest in starting a new gender-neutral line of maternity clothing, call me. Thank you so much for taking your time and coming along with me.